Hi everyone, welcome to this video on chapter 13, all about cybercrime. I'm going to try and make this video just short and sweet and hit the highlights. So if you need a little bit more detail, be sure to read the book. So our textbook outlines three different eras of fraudulent activity. So if we start back in like the 20s and 30s, where we had prohibition and kind of the start of the mobster era, that's what they call the Paleolithic era. And again, this is centered around creating and generating large amounts of cash and ultimately evading taxes. So this started with, like bootlegging and gambling, prostitution, drugs. So that is where kind of all this started. And again, that was in like the 1920s and 30s. Then we move into the Neolithic era in the 1960s, where the major focus became still the money laundering, tax evasion era. But here we're talking about more educated people, and they had more structure. So these were like sons and daughters of the 20s mobsters that had gotten college degrees, so they're a little bit smarter, and they're going to structure their criminal activities into a more traditional form, such as casinos and other cash-heavy businesses where they can intermingle their legitimate and illegitimate business activities. And then we move into the Geekolithic era, as we state. They don't tell us exactly when this started, but I'm guessing around the mid to late 80s is where we can see this Geekolithic. And here we're going to use some tools and techniques such as like offshore banking, internet servers, jurisdictional differences around the world, and technology that they can use to move and hide billions of dollars of cash. So those are the three different eras of our digital environment, or eras of digital or just fraudulent activities. All right, so quick overview of cybercrime. So first, the role of digital devices in cybercrime. So a digital device or computer can be used as one of four things when we're talking about cybercrime. So first, it could be an object, meaning the computer is the actual target of the crime. Second, it could be a subject, which means that the computer is what we are using to commit the crime. Third, it can be a tool, so something that's integral to the act that is being committed. And then fourth, it could be a symbol. So, if you think about, like a fraudulent office being set up, it's going to look legitimate if it has a computer there. So the computer is there as a symbol to create some of that credibility for that office. Next, I want to talk about the difference between computer fraud and computer crime. So these terms are often used interchangeably, but there are a few little tiny differences. So first, computer fraud. So remember, fraud is having that intent to deceive. So a computer fraud is a fraud accomplished with a computer. Whereas a computer crime involves hardware, software, data that's destroyed or manipulated due to acts which are not intended. So that is the difference between a computer fraud and a computer crime. Kind of intent is kind of always our rule of thumb when we're thinking about fraud. When we think about the losses and damages related to those computer crimes, the most common type of loss is going to be an economic loss. So we're going to have the cost of responding to an illegal act, or conducting a damage assessment, restoring our programs, lost sales, lost wages, because our employees couldn't work. Those are going to be economic damages. But there are also some special losses that we have under federal statutes, in addition to those economic losses. So there's a few of these. So the first one is that we could have an actual or potential effect on medical care. So again, these are special losses under federal statutes. So they're going to kind of carry a heavier penalty if you are caught doing some of these. So again, the first one is an actual or potential effect on medical care. So for example, if a treatment plan is modified based on false information that came from this crime, that would be an example of a potential effect on medical care, because someone's care is altered because of the fraud that occurred. The second one is the second special loss is we could have physical injury to a person. So, one example, in the movies, they're always like hacking into, the traffic light system. Well, if you hack into the traffic light system and someone is in a car accident, they're going to have some physical or they could potentially have physical injuries. So that again is one of these special losses, is if someone is injured because of your computer crime. And then a threat to public health or safety. So in the physical crime, when you manipulated with those traffic lights, someone was actually injured. But if there was even just the threat that someone could be injured, that is also considered a special loss under these federal statutes. And then finally, we could have damage to a computer related to the administration of justice, national security, or national defense. So if you tap into a law enforcement agency's computer system, maybe you got arrested and you want to erase your arrest record, you could damage that information, which is related to justice. So that is another type of special loss. And then last, the international aspects of computer crime. So, we think about, the Russian influence on elections and all the things that we've heard about. And we know that there is this international dimension. It's increasingly likely there's going to be jurisdictional differences. It's going to be difficult to identify, locate, and extradite suspects from around the globe. Securing electronic evidence is going to be very difficult because of this international aspect. Relating to some of these things, complaints have dropped, but losses have risen. And then also relating to the international aspect, we have the Council of Europe Cybercrimes Convention, which was created in 2006 in an attempt to combat the global problem of criminal activity on a dispersed computer network. So that's kind of this little overview. Now I want to talk about some frauds that we can see specifically relating to the digital world. So first, insider threats. So computer crimes from employees inside an organization. They're going to have the opportunity to commit a fraud. They're going to be aware of holes in the system. There might be less stringent supervisory controls over our IT personnel. So there is the threat that you can have some of these cyber crimes or cyber frauds happening from someone inside your organization. We also have the risk that we could have some hacking. So someone seeking unauthorized access to your computer system. They could incorporate maybe some unsuspected digital evidence into their schemes, gain access to by generating a system acceptable username and password, and they can get access into your system. Social engineering is a type of this digital hacking. So this is just a simple deception to gain access to your information. Maybe you go and pose as a new or a temporary worker to gain information, to get into the building. You might be able to log in, pose as someone in a position of authority, to get employees to reveal some confidential information. Maybe you get into the building and then can retrieve some documents out of the trash. So that's this idea of social engineering, is you're actually going and physically going to a place and trying to get in and get some information. And then we have hacker manipulation, such as like a Trojan horse virus or a trapdoor, or all of the various types of things we can do. So wiretapping, simulations, modeling, backdoors, all these sorts of things that I have no idea about. that can be done by hackers. One of those things is viruses. So a virus is going to attack your software. It's going to be a hidden computer program that's either going to shut down your computer or slow it down, can ruin your data, destroy your computer, overload your email network, all sorts of things that these viruses can do. There's a whole bunch of different types, macro viruses, I love you, boot selector, parasites, stealth worms, all sorts of different types of viruses that we can have. But essentially the virus is going to come in and attack your computer. So you want to make sure you have some antivirus software to try and prevent these things from happening. When it comes to your hardware, software, and data security, you want to make sure you have effective passwords and security measures on your computer. Maybe, when we log in to SFA now, we have to use Duo. So having that dual authorization, maybe a smart card. I was at the doctor yesterday, and every time they wanted to log in, they had to put their card into their computer in order to log in. So that's that extra layer of security. So electronic commerce. So this is a type of cyber fraud where we have electronic signatures. We can, not a fraud, it's a control that we can have. So having electronic signatures and encryption and the smart cards in order to prevent some of these things from happening. Typical internet schemes. So old frauds adapted for the digital devices and the internet. So they can still have the same sorts of schemes that we had in the past. They just have adapted them to a digital environment. So for example, like chain letters or Ponzi schemes. They were around long before the computer was involved, and now they've just adapted them to be on their computer. We can also have some new threats. So we can have phishing and farming and internet auction frauds and spamming. So these are new types of threats that have come about in our digital world. So how can we combat internet frauds? So again, we want to make sure we're encrypting our confidential information using a dual user identification. We don't want to store financial information or customer data on our web servers. We want to make sure we have firewalls that can be used to attempt to prevent unauthorized access and control interactions between our servers and our internet. So those are just some of the basic things that we can do. When it comes to reporting some of these things, there's this group or the center called the Internet Crime Complaint Center, or IC3. And essentially, they are there as kind of this repository organization where they'll receive and develop and refer criminal complaints regarding cybercrime. So if you get a cybercrime, you can talk to them and they will review it, do some research on it, and then refer it to the appropriate federal, state, local, international law enforcement agency, whoever is best suited for that. So that concludes my discussion on cybercrimes. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.